design. So everything having to do with legal technology. And so with that, we do have a lot of clients that ask a lot about AI and what that means and how they can use it. And so I'm just really tickled to be here with Colin and Jerry to talk about one of my favorite topics. Jerry?
Okay, I muted myself while Lauren was talking because I didn't want to accidentally make a noise. As Colin said, and thank you, Lauren, I'm Jerry Levine. I'm the Chief Evangelist and General Counsel at ContractPod AI. We are one legal platform. I've got to get used to saying that. And what we focus on is CLM, but we're building out the entire legal experience for law departments. I'm really happy to be here today with you, Colin, and to speak with you again, Lauren.
Perfect. Before I jump in, I want to thank our sponsor today, ContractPod AI. Always want to give them a shout out. Love the company. I love what they do. And they're growing rapidly if anybody's looking for a job. The question
Thank you, Colin.
To kick off, right? Lauren, what exactly does AI mean for you? And Jerry, can you take that question next? Because I think we all really want to wrap our hands around that one.
All right. Well, so I will give you the more practical answer, and I know Jerry will give you the more precise answer. So the practical answer is artificial intelligence is an enabler. What it does is it takes things that humans used to have to do and make it happen in a quicker fashion, in a predictable, consistent fashion. So as you want to talk about, there's machine learning, there's elements to the ontologies that are established in order to get artificial intelligence to work. But realistically, if you just say, what is this AI business all about? What you're talking about is a tool, an enabler to make things go faster, better, and more consistent. Jerry, why don't you add to that? I'm sure you could probably do a better job than me.
Sure. So I like that because I've been working in AI now for almost a decade. I was previously general counsel at a very large private AI company. And I've always taken the stance that AI is a tool. It is not something that replaces people. It's something helpful. So in the end, and I'd say that's how we see it from our view here at ContractPod AI, but personally, the point of artificial intelligence is to enable, as Lauren mentioned, humans to do things better, faster, and easier. And one of the things I've always thought about it, and one of the things I've always said is that you shouldn't be scared of AI as a practitioner or as a person using it. You should be looking at ways you can use artificial intelligence to make your job faster, better, and more efficient so that you have more time to focus not on small things that just eat up time, but on big picture items. I think that's a really good way to do it. In terms of specifically, AI right now in law is something that helps you with respect to contracts specifically. It really is just something that helps you get through the process faster, focus more on what you need to actually do, and even in most cases, improve how well you can review a contract or determine maybe it's not even worth looking at that document because it's close enough to what you accept anyway. Now, that's a very broad brush. So
let's get more focused on legal operations. How is AI used in legal operations, Jerry?
Sure. So there's a number of ways. We've obviously seen it for those of you who grew up in the EDiscovery boom. That's where I first started. AI replaced hundreds, and I use the word replace, but it really hasn't. There's always that second level of review. But it has taken the ability for teams that are in an e-discovery context to go faster and look at more documents in a shorter period of time. Just the note I always say is when I first started, there was a Deckert, the big law firm, was making $1 million a day on the Vioxx trials in e-discovery, and that lasted 3 years. If you were to say that, you would get laughed out of the room if someone told you were going to charge them $1 million a day. But more focused on today's use cases, it's being used to expedite contract review, whether it's assisting in finding hot topics or areas that need review, calling out portions that may not match your company specific key terms or negotiation points, to determining where you are. And everyone can hear the AIs in my house are going off right now. So I should have muted that before it started. All the AIs in the house just lit up. So that was exciting. So where do you see it? You see it in the review stage. You see it even in document analysis, and reviewing terms, and you see it in the ultimate extraction of the key legal obligations at the end of a contractual period, so that you can pull that out, report on them without needing to have a paralegal or yourself or someone else run through those terms.
Perfect.
So I'd like to add to that if I could.
Yeah.
So when you think about how artificial intelligence can help the legal operations team, there are insights related to contract, and I'd say that's the largest population of use cases for AI in legal operations. It's related to contracts. But then there's also some peripheral things that we're starting to see for legal operations, which is things like workflow management or work balance, workload balancing, or request processes where requests can come in through a bot of some kind that then helps facilitate routing that request into the right person in legal. And then another area is in claims management. So for general liability or specific areas of, whether it's physical damages or things of that nature, like trying to understand better how your risk triangles are being established and how you can perform some actuarial analysis. So there are a couple of really interesting things that are happening for legal operations, but it's really the world of contracts is where it is. And if I may, I'd like to talk a little bit about the use cases in contract management for AI. Would that be all right, gentlemen?
Absolutely.
So to break it down, there's the idea of, can AI help me create my contract faster in my system? So that's one use case. The second use case is, can AI help me read what's in a contract that I didn't author? So that's often referred to as third-party paper ingestion or evaluation. A third use case is, can AI help me with my electronic filing cabinet of crud that needs to be normalized and go into my contract management system? And then finally, we get to some of the really interesting use cases, which is where Jerry was alluding to, which is, now that I'm in the process of negotiating, how do I make the best decisions based on the patterns of decisions that have been made before in my company or within my zone of my practice group of my company? So I just wanted to put that out there. Is like, there's really kind of 4 or 5 different use cases for how AI is supporting contract lifecycle management.
And one thing I think, Lauryn, going off of that, I think they're growing as we're identifying new areas where AI can come in and assist the people working with contracts, regardless of their role. We're seeing that that even the small needs can be automated or assisted with artificial intelligence to really drive this. One thing I do want to point out, and I think that this is, Colin, I don't know if you want to take a couple of the questions that have come through.
Yeah. I'll move to them. I have one more to hit you guys with, and then I was going to jump into them.
Awesome. So before you do that, one thing that I think is important, I'd like to think of AI and IA. So you have artificial intelligence, but also intelligence augmentation. So I tried, or some people say AI and AI, augmented intelligence. Ultimately, they're tools. We're using them to do things better. And you've got to work with a tool that augments you as a practitioner, augments you as a user, so that you can really deliver the best results to your organization. So
a follow up on that then for Lauryn, like what are some of the main reasons why companies decide to go on a whole digital transformation and incorporate in AI within the legal department?
So I think it is peer pressure. A legal department is often looking at digital transformation as part of a larger enterprise transformation project. So I'm working with a client right now where they did a satisfaction survey internally, and one of the number one concerns was contracts, and it was the time it was taking to get a contract through the system. And so that started a conversation about how you can fix that, and digitalization is certainly a way to do that. So I think that the legal department often starts a digital transformation process with where is the volume and where can we have the most impact by updating or modernizing a specific process. And so contracts, contracts are as certain as death and taxes. So everybody has them. Everybody's got some complexity that they need to figure out with their process. So if they've heard about this catchphrase, artificial intelligence, they naturally go, okay, well, the enterprise is looking at digital transformation. Digital transformation certainly could incorporate AI. What's the biggest bang for my buck in AI? It's always going to be contracts.
So you talked about I'm just going to jump into Anne-Marie's question about what's the difference between AI and machine learning. Is there much of a difference?
Jerry, I'll let you take that one. I have an opinion as well, but
yeah, you could see I'm struggling to say whether there's really much of a difference. I look at machine learning as a subset of AI, where if you want to look at, ultimately AI is the attempts by us as human beings to create a intelligence that is not a human intelligence or an animal intelligence. And the part of that is teaching machines to do something. Now, you can break it down, but in most cases, you'll see something like AI/ML, artificial intelligence and machine learning. So in most cases, they're pretty much very, very similar. At its core, if you don't have any machine learning, your AI is not going to really do much because you're not going to be able to teach it. You're not going to be able to train anything. So in the core, I think whenever you see the word machine learning, you can substitute the words artificial intelligence for it. One of the other key things is AI is scary to people. It really is. Machine learning doesn't sound quite as scary. We don't have movies where they talk about machine learning. We have movies where you have killer robots and the AIs are going to attack us. No one ever says the MLs are going to attack us. So in some ways, I know that if you're a computer scientist, you will have you might say, sure, machine learning is this specific set of artificial intelligence tasks that we train a computer to do.
Perfect.
But in your daily life, I don't think you're going to hear, oh, well, those are two completely different things.
Okay. I think, Anne-Marie, I hope that answers your question. So Satish Pandey, good to have you here, Satish. He asks about, Jerry, you mentioned about reviewing contracts using AI. How accurate is the review process? Still, our attorneys need to review contracts thoroughly, even though the tool reviews at a certain extent. Does it help in reviewing things which humans might not be able to notice?
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. So no matter what, I always say these are tools that you have to be a human to use. The system can make decisions on its own, but they're human-driven decisions. So first of all, if you set up our tool or any tool that looks at and analyzes contracts and says anything over 100,000 has to go through this process, let's say $100,000. That tool will note the number 100,000, but it's not right now making a value judgment. It just knows that contract is worth over $100,000. Mm-hmm. So you do need a human behind that, but the goal is to really make your process as a human more accurate. What I think there's a recent study from the law department operations. Colin, sorry to talk about one of your competitors on your.
I love those guys. Believe me, I love it. If it's advancing the industry,
But I think what we've discovered through this is that you can actually improve significantly over just human direct review through using AI. And the goal is not to get the simple things. It doesn't at this point I can read an MSA in a few minutes and issue spot very quickly as a lawyer. But maybe there's something I wasn't looking for through the AI. Maybe I'm able to say, hey, that's new. I haven't seen that. Or even, it looks like they redlined something but accepted their own red line. Yes, I can run a comparison, but through the use of an AI tool, maybe I'm able to get that caught faster or earlier in the process.
Yeah.
Now, so yes, it can help in reviewing that. Um, but as far as accuracy, and Colin, sorry, I know I'm talking quite a bit. As far as accuracy, it's going to depend on your vendor, on what they've trained on, and then if there are specific things that need to be done for your company. If you've got a very specific contract or very specific industry only contract, it's going to take a little more time to train that. But for most general clauses, most general contracts, you have very high accuracy out of the box. Training only makes it better.
Perfect, Jerry. Satish, I hope that answered your question. Brian Harstein, welcome, my friend. He asks, are there any unique qualities from one AI tool to another in the world of contract review and creation to do all AI tools do essentially the same thing? What distinguishes one tool from another beyond the look of the program themselves? Lauren, do you want to take that one?
It's a resounding yes, Brian. There are differences in what is being done. So no two AI tools are offering the same platform for which to review. No two tools are offering the same method in which you teach the machine how to learn or the exponent in which it learns. So it makes it very difficult as a consumer to understand what you're getting into. I think there's a lot of misinformation about what tools are doing, and completely innocently, I do think that salespeople have a tendency to oversell what a tool can do without setting the expectation of what you must do to prepare to get that benefit. So what you want to look for in ContractPod AI is an excellent example, is you want to look for something that handles the use cases that are important to you. So if your use case is most everything you ever do is on third-party paper, then you need a tool that can really read third-party paper and extract those data attributes that you need in order to start your workflow. If everything you do is on your own paper, then you want to invest in something that looks at clause library and suggestions on that library, and looks for patterns when you leave your default position or your fallback terms. So you've really got to focus in on what it is that you need and be explicit with the vendors that you're talking to make sure that you're getting a solution that both fits that need and you understand what it takes in order to prepare to get that result. In my experience, when we're helping customers get ready for AI, they underestimate the amount of work you need to do to get yourselves organized to get the best out of it.
Jerry, you want to add anything to that, or?
No, I think that, Lauren, that was so good because I think
Yeah.
I really do agree that what, Colin?
No, I said, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Um, I thought that I got disconnected for a second. I think that one of the big things, and Lauren's really correct, the more you can tell us as a vendor about your need, the better off we can be in telling you if the product that you're looking at is the right fit. Before, I mean, one thing I forgot to mention was before I joined ContractPod, I had actually purchased ContractPod AI for my company, and we were using it there for 2 years before I jumped over to this role here. And my key need at the time was I wanted to be able to extract the final contract's terms, and that was my number one thing. My paralegal had left, my slashed, of course, and I got told to find a tool to do it. And that was my number one. That was my number one need at the time. Now, it's not the only thing ContractPod AI does, but when I was looking, I said, here's what I expect, but here's what I really need. So I think that's a really good point in when you're discussing with your vendor, provider like Lauren's company Qualitas, or anything. You want to be able to set forth what are you looking to do, but and she's absolutely right as well, that don't expect that the tool is going to be out of the box, is going to solve every problem. There will be that time where we're going to need, as the vendor or as the implementation partner, we're going to need to ask you, what do you want to accomplish in order to properly configure this for you?
Perfect, Brian. I hope that answers your question. There's a lot of great information there. A follow up from that one, like and this one's, let's start with you this time, Jerry. What are the misconceptions with AI?
So sure. So I think this follows on very well, Colin. One of the misconceptions that we see a lot is that everything is going to be perfect out of the box. There's nothing you need to do. There's nothing you need to think about. And so I do think that the prior question had a lot about this. But the other big misconception is that it's going to steal your job. And I know we talked about this a few minutes ago. I know that this always comes up, but it's not. If you're worried about, what you should be thinking about when you're selecting is, how does this help me do my job? Not is this going to take something away from me? And really what we find is, actually, believe it or not, is that hiring actually has increased in departments where they've adopted AI in many cases, because they're able to focus on new projects. They're not sending as much outside, and they're able to say, we didn't have time to do this before. Now we can bring someone on to do this task because we no longer have to spend this much money going out. Not a dig at outside counsel there, but internal departments want to be able to do more things with AI, more things with less money. And if we can enable that, then we can drive both value and drive more employees, more experience, and more efficiency of that department.
You want to add to that, or
go ahead, Colin?
No, do you want to add to that one?
Well, I was just going to add that what Jerry is saying is, there is no easy button, but there is also no Skynet. So we're definitely in a golden age of exponential learning and capabilities and technology. And so whether you're using AI for contract review, contract extraction, or even, law firm invoice review, all of those use cases, what you want to do is make sure you're clear on what you need and how to get it. There's a question in the chat that is asking, is it better to go with what the CLM provider gives us, or is it better to get a point solution? And the answer really is mixed. So when you have a company like ContractPod AI that has absolutely invested in their artificial intelligence and made that part of their DNA, they're going to be able to give you everything you need as it relates to that contract use case. And in fact, ContractPod AI is expanding into things like matter management and bill review and point solutions as well. So the AI is going to develop in that way too. But when you think about all of the things that you need to do in legal operations, everything requires calibration in how you get AI to work in it. And so your CLM providers are going to provide AI that's related to the use cases on contracts. Your matter management and e-billing providers are going to be providing AI as it relates to law firm invoice review. And so you're going to be in a place where the providers that know the subject matter the best are going to have more opportunity to develop their AI in that regard. Now, I am not knocking the companies out there that establish themselves as an AI provider that can be connected to anything. That is possible too. But just remember, just like you guys have to explain what your job is to people outside the industry, we have to explain to AI outside the industry what the use cases are that need to be done.
Perfect.
I'm worried about my job now. Lauren's clearly gunning for me.
Not at all.
Thank you for those very, very, very kind words, Lauren, on behalf of ContractPod AI. I really appreciate that.
Let me ask both of you this question. What does it take for a legal department to get going? What are some of the steps?
Lauren, do you want to start, or should I take that one first?
This is the question I get asked the most, because I'm the one that's always cautioning people that it's not an easy button. I'm the one that's usually telling people, all right, you got to know what you want so you know what you're going to get. So it really does start with defining your problem, and then identifying how AI can support that, and being really honest with yourself about what element of change you're ready for. So as an example, let's say that you want to purchase ContractPod AI, and you know that you have a body of contracts that are in a shared drive somewhere. And you know that you want to take that information and get it into the system, so that when you go to amend something, you've got the previous contract, you can start establishing what your playbook is going to look like for your fallback positions, all that good stuff, right? Okay, well, what's in the filing cabinet is probably, you've got duplicates, you've got incomplete PDFs, you've got things that don't have signatures on it, you don't have a relationship between the primary agreement and the amendments, or they're in different subfolders, or the company's name has changed, and suddenly you've got, there's all sorts of noise that's going on there. And oh, by the way, don't forget about your your document repository requirements, right? Your document retention. Like, should you even have all of those old copies anymore? And so there's all this kind of work that has to go through. So just my advice is always start small, start with your use cases, and make sure you're really organized with how you go about it. If you remember those things, you're going to be successful wherever direction you take it.
Follow-up question for Lauren, and then you can weigh in on it as well, Jerry. It's like, when selecting a vendor, what are some of the things that people should be looking out for with AI solutions?
Absolutely, what you're looking for is a healthy product roadmap with AI. So a lot of companies right now are buying AI as opposed to developing it in-house. But how are they integrating that into their product? How are they keeping the platform at a reasonable license cost? How are they presenting that to you as a licensed customer? So the number one thing you want to see is that the roadmap is robust in the context of AI. And you also want to see that it is very well integrated with the main thing you're buying from that company.
Should I be flagged as a buyer if it's like a build versus a buy? Should I be leaning towards one or the other if they're building it in house, or they're buying the AI and then utilizing it?
So that is kind of a whole nother ball of wax. If you're going to be establishing your own solution for AI, then you're doing everything, as opposed to a lot of companies are really looking at getting third-party solution providers to do that. I know that there's software development kits that you can access that can allow you to extend things on platforms that are homegrown. It's just not my wheelhouse, but I will say that the same logic still applies. Having a use case, having a clear set of organization, and knowing what you're after.
Perfect.
I think one thing specific to that, Colin, is of course, building your own solution is an option for some companies, but you're building your own solution. You're bringing in engineers, you're bringing in developers, you're bringing all that in to possibly replicate something that is already out there, that other people have already built. And it depends on really your business's focus, your company's focus, and what the amount of time, risk, money, and effort you're willing to spend into doing that whole process. There are, running an AI is processor and computer intensive. So, if you're thinking about building something in-house, you not only have to think about just how it's going to be used in-house, but also what are your needs going to be from a scalability aspect.
Right.
I've worked with companies that built their own contract management platform in-house years ago that are now moving to to products like ContractPod AI, third-party providers, service providers, because they can't scale anymore. They're designed in 2007, 2008, 2009, and now that they're going, well, we want to bring in all this new functionality, they can't do it. So they're going now to the outside providers and doing it. I would say when we get this question, usually it's an idea of how much are you going to spend and how much time are you going to burn developing your own internal solution. And if that is absolutely the way you have to go, then we understand. But in many cases, what we find is SaaS is normal now. People buy software from providers all the time. People use subscription services all the time. So they're more. It's become less of a why don't I do this myself? It's become less of a roll your own decision and more of a I want this up and running. I want it done right. I want people who are subject matter experts, and I want to make sure that the product is supported, and I know it can grow with our company. As Lauren said earlier, look at the roadmap, look at what's going on, and in most cases, we found that it's a very, very small segment of customers that are even considering building their own at this point.
So when you're both looking at the market and you're looking at the customers that adopted this AI and the legal technology, what has the impact on the whole company been by doing AI?
Yeah, one of the core things are, of course, we in legal always get blamed as the department of no or the slowdown department or however you want to call it. But a key answer that AI gives is, you can speed that up because you're not as tied down. You can create additional workflows that speed up your processes that make things that you're working on work faster, better, more efficiently. I think if we look at some of the more recent results of industry surveys and industry reports, what we do know is that delivering legal services internally is a tremendous value add. So the more you can do internally with these tools, the better the value is to the company. And in fact, what we found recently is that for the first time ever, again, going back to that LDO survey I mentioned earlier, nearly 40% of companies said that legal is now seen as a value add, whereas they used to say we were seen as a cost center. They're now being seen as a value addition to the company. And you're finding that, especially among legal ops people, they're being called in to answer questions from other parts of the organization on where they can add value from integrating better with the law department. AI in general helps that because you're able to train it, you're able to teach it to do new things, and the information that you can get out of your contracts, out of your reports, can then be adapted and looked at through other tools, so that you can find additional areas where you can contain costs or improve service or just generally design a better process inside your organization.
So a question for Lauren, like what are some of the main advantages of digitizing your process within legal teams? And, what are you looking at? What are clients saying to you?
So we do a lot of work with companies that are looking to not just automate a process, but to optimize a process. So predominantly in contracts, contracts don't always originate from the legal department. Number one, legal doesn't just wake up one day and say, hey, I want to do a contract for somebody. Like there's always a request process that comes ahead of that, right? And then in a lot of companies, there's this kind of delineation where legal is responsible for certain kinds of contracts, but maybe procurement is responsible for another set, or the sales organization. And so there's this tension between the key stakeholders on contracts. And so when you look at technology, and specifically contract lifecycle management technology and by extension AI, it's the great unifier. It creates a platform where everybody knows that they can orient their taxonomy of how contracts are established and classified. It can orient how the contracts go through those different teams in order to be processed. And it really gives everybody a way that they can optimize something, not just automate it, if that makes sense. Like there's really that difference there, right? And so a lot of customers, big and small, that we work with really want to take AI in order to solve a specific problem. My only advice is make sure that you measure it before and after, because that which is measured moves.
So I've so many questions, but I'm going to go back to the Gartner study. By 2024, half of the legal in-house work is going to be automated. What does a world look like for legal in-house teams when half the work is automated and it's pushing to automate 90% or more by 2036 or something, right?
So I kind of think that's a little bit of malarkey, but the reason I say that is because the legal department's responsibility is to manage the contingent liabilities of the company. Risk will never go away. And so, yes, can things be automated? Can we get really good at legal service requests and routing things? And can we get really good at creating contracts and getting all of that high volume, low value stuff off of the plate of the really important lawyer? Absolutely. And I do think 2024 is a good way to look at it, because that's 2 years from now. Gosh, look at how far we've come in the last 2 years or the last 10. Jerry was talking about homegrown solutions. My first CLM when I ran legal operations was a FileNet database that I created. So we've come a long way, and we're going to continue to do that. I think right now is the inflection point for looking at how we're going to have legal and legal operations serving the business, but risk doesn't go away and judgment doesn't go away. So I still think we'll all have jobs in 2 years, Colin.
Good.
I think we're going to have jobs for a very long time. I'm as as Lauren was saying, it really is amazing what we can do, but there's a tremendous amount that's still out there to be worked on, to be automated, to be looked at. And the truth is that even though we can score risk or we can determine that something is not, it may meet a risk number, it's still not replacing the human judgment, the decision from a GC or a lawyer that, you know what, on this deal, we can accept this, but on this deal, we can't. And there may be two completely identical deals, but that lawyer may know company A is always late paying their bills. Company B always pays early. So they're willing to take that risk from company B, but not willing to take it from company A. Mm-hmm. Now, could all that be tied together at some point? Yes, but you're never gonna have a true replacement, at least in the next year or two, for judgment. I think as we're going further into the future, it's more and more assistance with process management, more and more assistance with thinking about the downstream risk, but it's still going to rely on, when you get that, you're going to get a green light, you're going to get a yellow light, you're going to get a red light as the automations and AI score that risk. But it's going to be for a human to say, okay, I'm willing to take that, or hey, we can take this, but we have to put these changes in. So I think yes, automation's growing. It's the key to the future. We can't continuously. I mean, for 150 years now, humans have been automating things as quickly as they can, from building cars to processing documents. But every time they come out and they say, someone comes out and says, "Oh, this is going to be the end of this job," or "This is going to be the end of that role," and we don't really see it. We see people changing how they work. We see the people taking the time now to do things better, to do things right, and relying on the technology changes to make themselves better.
Yeah, no, this is fascinating stuff. Just switching gears a second. What is the profile of a company that wakes up and says, "I want to do like an AI strategy for my legal team"? And what are the questions or strategies that they're adopting to make this happen? That could be for Lauren.
Okay. Well, I would say Sometimes we'll talk to people about what are they ready for, and I think that's the heart of your question. So I don't know if it's one profile of a size of a company. It's not like if you have less than 5 lawyers, you're not going to be able to automate. It's nothing of that nature. I'd say it speaks more to maturity. And so there's an article by Kingsley Martin that came out a few years ago that talked about the CLM maturity spectrum, right? And there's lots of them out there. Different people have done it, but that one is pretty well known. And you have to know, are you on the spectrum of, are you ad hoc in your processes? Are you basic in your processes? Are you more optimizing your processes? If you're in a place where you're optimizing or you aspire to optimize, that's when you really want to look at artificial intelligence. Doesn't mean you can't get value out of it if you're in the more basic maturity level. It just means you're not going to get that exponential wow factor until your processes are really kind of situated. So in other words, it's kind of like you want to get the most bang for your buck, right? And your buck might be the license cost, or it might be the time you have to spend getting ready for it. And so I always think of the attributes are, where are you on your maturity scale? Where are you in your ability to devote time and organization to get this thing done? And where is your organization on a change management continuum? How do you get change to occur in your company? Are you a company that's more enrolling people in ideas? Or are
We
you
should
a company that's more edict driven, where if the GC says something, gosh darn it, it's going to happen? And just understanding those things are what will help you figure out, yes, you're ready for X, Y, and Z.
the change management thing, we should do a whole series on that because there's so much information out there.
Yeah.
It's the number one thing surveyed from our members that is the biggest hurdle. And there's just not enough information or thought put into that. We should do something sometime on that for sure.
I'd love to.
It,
We do have engagements where all we're doing is focusing on the change piece, because gosh, that's the hard part.
Wow.
But it's
we
fun.
find
But you love it, right?
It's fun.
we find that too. I mean, we find that the toughest thing to do is change the change management process, explaining to, in fact, what I say is I did it wrong my first time. I gave an edict. No one used my first contract management platform. It was too difficult. I didn't involve stakeholders. I didn't get input. I said, this is what legal needs. This is what legal's doing. This is what we're going to use. Sales was like, we don't want to touch it. And so I spent the next 2 years trying to get sales involved. And generally, I've been that person. I've learned from my bad act.
Oh, me too.
And now the first thing I say is, do you have people on board with this? When someone says, how quickly can we get this done? I always ask, who's on board? Is your sales team on board? Is your procurement team on board? Or are you just going to go ahead and say, this is what we're doing? Because it doesn't work as well. And Colin, if I can go back to something Lauryn said just a moment ago, if that's
Perfect.
okay.
Yeah.
We tend to look at it as, so we tend to have that same question. Where are you in your company life cycle? Not just your legal department life cycle, but are you at the need where you are saying, we don't even know where anything is. We've got to capture the basic documents that we're using. So we have customers that are first time they're ever buying legal tech. They have nothing in place. They're still, everything gets printed right now and put in file cabinets. To some that have major legal ops teams that have a team of 7 legal operations professionals, 10 legal operations professionals who are coming in and saying, here's what we want to do. We just need your product. We need to be trained. We'll take it from there. So there's really a tremendous continuum of where customers and buyers and users are in that scale. And one thing that we've run into is, and I think Colin, you and I may have talked about this a long time ago, is this kind of, there's a generational shift that I'm starting to see in law practice today, as baby boomers are starting to retire. And if you think about this generationally, baby boomers are starting to retire. They were the GCs, they were the CLOs, and now the new GCs and CLOs seem to be millennials and late generation Xers. So you're seeing this change from a very technology fearful group, or groups that didn't go to law school with the everyday dealing with legal technology, Westlaw, Lexis, all of that, to the extent that we consider that legal tech, to folks that are now going, well, we've done it this way for a long time, but it doesn't work anymore. Because you can't manage 10,000 contracts a year if you have 5 people and no platform for managing it. You just can't. It will drive everyone batty.
Like from even from a law firm perspective, it's negligent now if you don't use the system, right? In some respects, to expedite it and give it best efficiencies to your clients.
Absolutely.
Just going to jump back into the questions. Let me see. Andrew, you had a question / comment. I don't know what it is. If you could retype it again, I'll ask it. Susan Kelly, you're not alone. I have one more question for both Jerry and Lauryn, and if you have any other questions, please type them. My last question is: how can legal tech help impact business outcomes? And then we close out strong in that.
I mean, just being able to know and expedite is a tremendous driver for how you're impacting business outcomes. We've seen that there's a increase in the efficiency of deal closure from adopting contract management systems, from adopting ContractPod AI. We see customers turn around and say, we were able to do this 10, 15, 20% faster just from the ability to get things in a proper way where our legal team isn't chasing folks around. But beyond that, there's this great ability from legal technology, contract management systems specifically, to bring in and get folks on the same page, to know that your documents are in. I live in a city, so if you're hearing all the sirens outside, I apologize. I'm not actually on fire. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. They're definitely coming for me. But the core thing, one of the core things is by working with a provider to build your process, and in many of these ways, you can take some of the manual steps out of it already beneficial process. And that's a big portion of what we get asked. And I think Lauryn gets asked is, we don't even have a process for this. Or if we do have a process, it requires having carrier pigeons send the document back between this person's office and this person's office. Well, if we can get rid of these small delays, maybe carrier pigeons are not a small delay, but if we can get rid of some of these delays, we can expedite it. And like I said earlier, we're seeing that one of the greatest improvements, that just having a legal team and having your legal operations team work on finding where the law department adds value, begins to add value throughout the company. So just there's a time savings, there's a knowledge, ability to capture the knowledge, and ability to shift some of the more basic items to folks that may not have been able to make a decision by themselves before, by adding AI on top of it, by adding these technological points of contact where they can really find a real value add. And I think that's one of the big areas we see it. Could I go on for another 2, 3, 10 hours or weeks about this? Of course.
That is until the firemen knock on your door.
Yeah.
So, look, I think since we're talking to an audience of legal operations team members, I think the role that you have is to be a harbinger of change. I think that the role you have is to help counsel your GCs and your AGCs on how technology can be supportive of the things that they want to improve, and recognize that you're in a wonderful position to broker conversations, not just within the legal department, but within IT or sales or procurement. And I think you're uniquely positioned to really help explain and set good expectations. It's not rocket science, but it is science. And so it requires, a certain finesse. And I think legal operations folks possess that in spades.
And Colin, I think we talked about this very early, and I spent a few minutes trying to find the statistic. But One thing that we're pushing very strongly with our clients is, can we help you get involved at an earlier stage of your process? This is one of the big things that we I'm sorry, in the early stage of your business process, not your internal process. But if we can get legal into the picture earlier, we're finding that there's a tremendous change, a tremendous speed up in turnaround, in decision making. Because one of the big things, and I know this as a lawyer, as an in-house counsel, I used to get emails, Jerry, why are you slowing this down? Why are you doing this? So if we can get, and I would always say, well, if they involve me at the beginning of the deal rather than in the last hour of the deal where they think they're about to get it signed, I don't have to sit down and go, hey, whoa, whoa, whoa. What do you mean you gave the customer unlimited liability? Because I'm at the point where I can do that. And what we find is, and this is something that I'm hoping the legal ops professionals can take home, is if you can set up your internal processes when you're making these decisions to bring legal in earlier, to get awareness earlier, you can actually just create a time savings from there. You can create a value addition from there because your law department, your lawyers, your teams are involved much earlier, which means a smoother deal process. And in many cases means that that your sales team isn't going back and saying, hey, why is legal interfering with our deal? Because all of a sudden they found out, well, actually you host all your data in the US, this customer demands all the data be hosted in Europe. Okay, well, suddenly legal tells you, this is a real problem that tech companies have. They go all the way to the end and only then do they find out that they can't do something. And I think that's a problem for all sales teams. You promise the moon and you find out that you're giving only 3 satellites because legal said that. We want to avoid that. We want to make that easier for you, your teams. And ultimately, one thing I like to say is, it's my job at ContractPod AI. It's our job to make you look good as a legal team, as a law department, to the rest of your company. And I think that's really key. We want you to look good. We want you to be considered heroes and not zeros.
No zeros on this crowd. I'm certain of that.
So we have a couple of other questions that came in from both Amy and Megan. Megan says first, if you guys have any advice on what industry certifications / degrees are preferred to stand out from others for individuals that want to move towards further specialization in their career.
So I'll take that because I can't tell, Megan, if you're referring to specialization in your legal operations career or as a legal professional in general. And so Jerry can probably speak to the legal professional. I am seeing more and more CLEs that talk about technology, so I think those are always beneficial. But specifically for legal operations, you don't have to be a lawyer to be a great operations person. I used to run legal operations and, my undergrad is finance, my master's is IT. But in the role of the operations person, you want to be thinking about how to augment some of your skills that maybe the rest of the legal department doesn't have. So that might be things like classes or certifications from the Project Management Institute. So like I have a PMP. Or it might be something having to do with change management. So there's a certification organization called PROSCII, PROSCII, that helps people get certified in change. It's a little bit of psychology and a lot of social engineering, but those are the sorts of things above and beyond, of course, getting certified in the technologies that your department is employing, right? So if you have a matter management and e-billing system, make sure you're certified from the vendor on using that product. If there's training to be had from using ContractPod AI, then get that training as well. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's sort of my response in the lane of operations.
So go ahead, Colin.
No,
Sorry.
Go ahead, Jerry. If you have some comments on for Megan.
I was going to say, what we tend to hear is folks with IT backgrounds, folks with finance backgrounds, but they all touch different areas of the legal operations sphere. I think it's the number one thing, and I say this somewhat jokingly, but also as a lawyer, is you have to be able to deal with difficult people because all lawyers are difficult. But I think that it's really just being able to communicate, being able to drive the change, and being able to speak the language and translate back and forth. A lot of my job now is translating between our customers, lawyers and law and legal operations people, and sometimes our sales or our R&D teams. But it's all, and I think Lauryn does a lot of the same, is you're acting as a translator, you're acting as a knowledge base for those people to be able to do it. So is there a specific degree or certification that's out there? I don't think so, but I think being on top of the latest trends and being part of groups like this, like Clock, World CC, any of the organizations that really focus on the future of law and how this is operating are going to have good training, good education, good educational materials, and be able to pursue that career further. If I know you said that you're not a non-attorney jack of all trades. I think it's a lot more about for lawyers, because we're not always trained in technology. I think it's being willing to sit down and go, okay, let me walk you through this, the same as you would with any tech-facing role, where you know the technology and you're dealing with people who are not in technology or who are not thinking about it every day.
Perfect. Megan, if you have any follow-up questions, please reach out to the three of us. I will share our information afterwards. There is one more question. We're coming up on the top of the hour, and I do want to give call-outs and thank yous and all that. But Amy has a question. She apologizes if she asked it already. Do you have any advice for getting buy-in, which is a really, really good topic, from other departments on using one CLM rather than their own products, and only view a CLM being illegal since the initiative, since government legal ops?
I do, but it's a lot to put into 2 minutes. So and now you're going to hear my dog barking because the doorbell just rang. So we've got it all. We've got fire trucks, we've got dogs.
Amy, let's follow. Why don't we keep this question? I will share with Lauryn and we'll follow up with you. Listen,
Sorry
guys,
about that.
I just want to say this is one of the best ones I've did. This is absolutely awesome. Two of you guys are just experts. Joy to be in your company and sharing this. Everybody attended. Thanks you for leaning in and asking questions. This has been awesome. Really appreciate you all being here. We will follow up with the recording. And if you have any follow-up questions, I'm going to share Jerry Levine and Lauryn Hake's emails. And we hope to see you at the next event next week. I'm going to hand it off to you guys if you have something else to say.
Lauryn, you go
Thank you
first.
for this opportunity. It's a really great engagement. Amy, I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to give you a good answer, but if you want to email me, I'll be happy to talk to you, because there's a lot there.
Yeah, I was going to say the same. Thank you all for attending. Amy, I'm also happy to answer, or just email Lauryn and I together. We'll be more than happy to take that. And I keep getting pinged by my team. Don't forget to mention, visit us at Legal Week. It's in just a few weeks. It's the first one since the start of the pandemic.
Yes.
And so I get to replace my...
You're at booth 2301, Legal Week, New York City. I'm going to push that out to everybody. Yeah. And I'll see you there.
So, and we have socks. If you like socks, we have socks.
Go ContractPod AI socks.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
So long. Bye.